Kia ora tātou. Good morning and welcome to everyone. This is day 9 of the hearings on Plan Change 7 submissions. And we start today with the submission by Biggs Agriculture. Who will speak for them?
Good morning. Kia ora, my name is Rebecca Biggs and I'll be speaking to that today.
Well, good morning and thank you for coming in.
Okay.
When you're ready, you may speak.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a director of Biggs Agriculture Ltd. We're a family farming business. Together with my husband and his family, we're farming near Fairlie. We farm approximately 1,800 hectares with the majority of arable crops. We complement this with some specialty seed and higher value crops, and we also trade beef cattle. The majority of our land is dry land, with the exception of 135 hectares of irrigated land. We irrigate this via shares with Opua Water Limited. Our irrigated farm sits just above the South Opua River Bridge on Clayton Road, with tributary extraction from the river via the Morris Road scheme, which abstracts under consents held by Cascade Irrigation Race. I myself grew up in Fairlie, as did my parents and grandparents, and now I'm lucky enough to be able to bring my 3 children up here. Fairlie is very much my home. As a child, I remember spending hours in the rivers, and it's nice to see my children doing this now. So I am a mum, a farmer, and a farmer's wife. I manage the finance and administration side of the business, whereas my husband, Ashley, is very much hands-on with the day-to-day crop and livestock management and general operations. I'm quite concerned for my children, for my own family, and also the families of those who are employed both by us and wider than that, those employed indirectly in supporting industries and jobs who really have no idea what all this is about. I look around our region and the number of people employed directly or indirectly by agriculture is huge. Our 3 children all enjoy the rural lifestyle. They all attend school locally in Fairlie and play sports for the local Mackenzie clubs. I really enjoy being part of such a thriving community and try to get involved in anything that my kids do. Looking around our community now, I see wonderful schools with strong roles. I also see a town centre that is growing, shops are full, and the numerous sports and community groups are all thriving. This is very different to when I was a child. There was a lack of local investment and there were plenty of empty shops. This was all pre-irrigation. My husband grew up farming, and when we moved back to Fairlie after travelling, we started farming alongside his parents. We both put our life savings into our own small block, and my husband Ashley continued to work for his family while I continued to work off farm. We chose to put all of my husband's wages into the farm and live just off mine in order to get a chunk of the mortgage paid off before starting a family. In 2007, just as our first daughter was born, we sold our first block and bought shares in the family farm, Biggs Agriculture. Through a lot of hard graft, sacrifice and risk, we've pushed ourselves to run the best farm, and we continue to do so. I continue to work part-time off-farm, which helps pay for extra expenses. Although a lot of the risk with farming comes from the weather, environmental and climatic conditions, and also what we have borrowed from the bank. With the economic reports that we have read, namely the reports written by Grant Porter, the farm consultant, we are quite concerned about our farm's financial viability post PC7. We paid a per hectare premium to purchase the irrigated part of our property in 2016 to help give our business more certainty on being able to grow higher value crops that help to increase the EBIT across our business. We borrowed the money from the bank in order to purchase this property, and it looks that if all goes ahead with the proposed South Opua flow regime, our property could become unviable in its current form. If we cannot manage to service the debt with the reduced production, we could have to look to sell, in which case the premium we paid on the land for the irrigation may not be able to be recovered. The significant amendments in the South Opua flow regime in the proposed PC7 and the Section 42A report appear to me to be unbalanced between environmental and economic outputs. The reports that I've read by expert Dr. Gregory Ryder show that the river is in good health. I acknowledge that the Step 1 flows under Table 14N, we can expect to see some ecological and quality outcomes to the river. But I strongly disagree with Step 2, which only provides incremental gains to river health, but the significant loss of economics on farm. I believe that once Step 1 of the regime has been implemented, we can then monitor what the actual outcomes are over a period of time in order to track the benefits to be in a much better place for the next round of plan changes. What makes it hard for me thinking about the impact of Step 2 of the flow regime and what it may have on our operation, not just for me personally, but also for our staff and our wider community. I also see that this is compounded, not just for us, but the dire effects to our neighbours and fellow irrigators. Anything that negatively impacts the well-being of our community, our family and friends, distresses me, to be honest. The South Apua flow regime looks to cause severe negative effects on the profitability of our business. The time and the amount of water available to us could mean that we can no longer grow the crops that give us the best return. These higher risk crops require water at certain times, and it would not be worth trying to grow them without the water availability. The crops that are harder to grow are worth more money, and we use our irrigated land to grow these, which then supplements the income on our remaining dryland farm. Upon looking to cut our expenditure in order to meet this drop, and when I look around our neighbours who are also reliant on water, I get really worried for our whole community. For us, this could be the loss of a staff member, which would be pretty horrific to deal with. We would still have the same amount of work to do, and everyone else would be put under stress if not overworked. Not to mention what it would mean for the employee and his young children. If we can manage in order to keep our staff, cuts will need to come elsewhere. Seems such a backward step to stop any investment into technology that can reduce inputs or into investment into fencing waterways and other plantings. I can't help but wonder if some of the rules that we're trying to impose today will have unintentional consequences, causing more negative environmental effects in the future. The streams that run through our properties have never in history been fenced. When we started a great fencing plan a few years ago, we've left setbacks along streams and fenced, and we have entirely fenced some wetlands on our property too. It's really great to see the plant life coming away, and it looks amazing. It's also great to see that the younger generation, my kids, will come home from a neighbour's house complaining about cattle and water, and the water then runs onto our place. I think that the way that the younger generation are looking at it is really promising. All the areas that we have paid for to be fenced off are now retired and won't be farmed again. These are also areas that we still pay rates on, and we paid rates for these as farmland. Among these areas we have an abundance of freshwater mussels and eels, and it's quite great that the kids can wander down to the stream and tease the eels out with some food. We hope that the work we're doing will make a positive impact, and we can't wait to see what other aquatic and plant life is restored in future years. Being involved with our local catchment group, we have an amazing group of stakeholders who always want the best for our community. Everyone works collaboratively to get the best possible outcomes for everybody involved. We have many great plans for future projects, and I'd hate to see that a lack of funds on farm would halt this. I see that the Adaptive Management Working Group is another amazing vehicle for looking after our water. It seems like such a great way to manage our resources collaboratively to maximise water and environmental benefits while adapting to different seasons and climatic conditions. So, as I narrated on my supporting documents, I think it would be great to invite you all on farm to show you what we do. We're ever so fortunate to live in and be farming in an amazing environment, and we strive to keep doing so to the best of our abilities for our children and grandchildren alike. I thank you for listening to me today.
Well, it's been a pleasure to listen to you, and you've provided as an appendix, I suppose, to what you've been presenting to us today, some photographs Do you wish to briefly take us through the photographs too?
I can, yes. So, yeah,
You have an irrigator there?
yes. So the photo on the top left is a photo on our farm. Yeah, that's my son Gus standing on the crop there. You'll see there's a crop of barley to the left, and to the right is a paddock that's been worked up for specialty seeds. Last year this was planted in hemp. You can also see in the horizon of that picture the lake in the background, which shows the locality of our property.
So is that Lake Opuha?
It is Lake Opua.
Yes, thank you.
And to the right is a photo of my children with a fish that they've caught in Lake Opua. It's really great for people to be able to get out and use the lake for food. There's also a photo of my children swimming in the South Opua. And the bottom two photos are in other paddocks of crop on our farm.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Van Voorthuizen, any questions of Ms Biggs?
Yes, thank you and good morning. What's the critical time of year for your operation in terms of irrigation?
Yeah, so with our irrigation, we sort of, I guess, is more the shoulder seasons of the irrigation season. Quite often we harvest our crops in January and February, at what point the crops are ripening off and they're not requiring any water. It sort of seems to be March, April when we're getting ready to plant our new crops that we require water to get those started. Also, if we're planting specialty seeds that have a shorter growing duration, we may require water in spring as well.
Okay. And you've mentioned a few crops. What are the typical crops that you irrigate?
Yep. So this year planted under irrigation we have chrysanthemums. We also grow linseed. We grow peas, bok choys and radishes.
Okay. It's quite a diverse range of crops.
There is, yes.
All right. No, thanks very much. That was just what I wanted to get an understanding of how it works on farm. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So you told us about the big investment decision that you had to make when you purchased and paid a premium for the irrigation.
Yes.
How long ago would that have been?
Okay, so we purchased that property in 2016.
2016.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have had some advice at the time from outside consultants, did you? Or from the bank?
Yes, we did, yes.
And did they explain to you the basis of the consents that go with the irrigation, that they don't last forever, that they're for set terms?
They certainly did.
They explained to you? And that there's no assurance that they'd be renewed on the same terms?
No, and we understand that.
You understand?
Yes. What we don't, I guess what I'm trying to get across here is more around that flow regime in the South Opua, and I'm certainly fine with the step 1 of the flow changes. It's the step 2 where there's only incremental advantages to the river itself, but much larger economic.
Yes, look, I do understand what you're saying there, and you'll know that we're hearing somewhat similar concerns by other senators. I think you said at one stage you thought that the Plan Change 7 might stop your ability to adopt technical advances. Did I understand that correctly?
No. I would. We've got a lot of technology on farm already, which around with different computers and GPS systems and those sorts of things on tractors, which help us variable rate spread and those sorts of things. But what I sort of meant was that if post Plan Change 7, if on-farm income or EBIT is reduced significantly by what's in the plan, that this could stop investment, or could be the money that would be further invested into technology or into further environmental changes going forward.
If on-farm income is reduced, would inhibit?
Yeah, it's where that reduction in income, what that means for what you've been investing in.
I understand that now. Yes, thank you. And you've been explaining all the activity that you've been taking on your own farm to keep the animals out of the streams. Had you heard that the government has made some new regulations about that as well?
Yes, I have, yes.
Yes, all right. Well, you're up to date with that. Well, Ms. Biggs, you've come in some distance to bring us up to date and tell us some interesting material about your circumstances, all very relevant, and we're interested in what you've been able to tell us. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, is the next submission Geraldine Water Solutions?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And who's going to speak for that? Is this Mr. Ward?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for coming, Mr. Ward. That's good of you to come and give us an explanation about your submission. We have the submission in front of us, so you won't need to read that to us. But this is your opportunity to speak to us directly and explain what you'd like to say in support of it.
No, thank you.
Well,
Good morning. My name is Nick Ward, and I'm here today presenting on behalf of the submission made by Geraldine Water Solutions in September last year. I'm also talking in our statement of evidence presented here today. As I said, my name is Nick Ward, and with my wife Michelle, we own a farm near Temuka. We're fourth generation farmers, and our farm family has been in this area for 125 years. We've always been early adopters, and irrigation has been part of the farming operation for the past 60 years. Today, most of our water is sourced from ground and surface water and stored in a pond as well, and this water irrigates our farm via 6 efficient irrigators. We have data loggers in the paddocks recording hourly the amount of water that the crops are using, and everything is done on time. Things are put in the right place at the right time. We operate an intensive cropping and horticulture property in the WRRP catchment, which falls within the boundaries of the WRRP catchment. We grow a wide range of specialty seed crops, including different species of grasses, fescue, cocksfoot, brassica seed, vegetable seed, such as hybrid radish, hybrid red beet, and hybrid spinach. And we grow onions, which we pack in our own pack house, and these are sold locally and overseas under our own brand called WRRP Fresh. I was part of the WRRP Water Society involved in the Rari River Subcatchment Plan. I am a member of the Ohepi Water Users Group, and I am the chairman of Geraldine Water Solutions. Fundamentally, the success of our business and other members of Geraldine Water Solutions are the results of reliable irrigation water. It's the key to attaining growing contracts, sustainable crop yields and milk production. Irrigation encourages processors and agricultural-based industries to our area. I have been farming, I returned to the family farm 30 years ago after spending time at Lincoln and some time overseas. In those early years, a lot of the farming land around us was sheep and mixed cropping and dairying. And probably in the past 25 years, because of reliable irrigation water, we have seen a lot of other agricultural-based businesses come to our area. Just to mention a few: apple orchards with apple packhouses, people growing carrots to produce carrot juice for the lucrative Japanese markets, a farmer's mill milling wheat for the local flour mill, for local flour, French fry factory, a potato crisp factory, onion packhouses, fruit processors, seed processing, honey processors, along with our meat processors and dairy factories. How has this been achieved? Reliable irrigation water in our area. All this agricultural produce is processed locally and is either consumed in New Zealand or exported through our local port here in Timaru to lucrative export markets. The changing framework of the Rari and Temuka catchments to meet the national policy statement means in simple terms that the availability of allocation to existing irrigators has been significantly reduced and minimum flows increased. As a result to this, alternative water source must be sought for these two at high risk catchments. The purpose of Geraldine Water Solutions, or as we call it GWS, is to increase the awareness of regulatory requirements, facilitate the sharing of information, understand future supply risks, investigate bringing in new water from our northern counterparts into and centred around the Geraldine area. GWS submitted to the Zone Committee that the proposed changes were not economically viable for consent holders, and we must be given more time to find alternative solutions before such adverse measures are imposed. GWS fully supports the Temuka Working Party and the Rari Water Society, both who are going to present to you. The catchment plans being developed must give effect to the NPS, which suggests unless alternative water supplies are found outside of these catchments, significant social and economic impact will be felt by the farming sector, families in the area, and all those vital businesses that service the rural sector. GWS received funding from Environment Canterbury and the Crown Irrigation Fund to conduct a full feasibility study for alternative water supply options, and we are extremely grateful for this. We must take an intergenerational approach on further water supply for future generations, but we can't financially burden and restrict the next generation with huge unserviceable debt. We need full community involvement in any proposed scheme. GWS is not a scheme yet, it is a group representing farmers who now realise the significant threats. Our goal is to investigate reliable supply options for existing irrigators of bringing water south. We have approximately 40 farmers in our group, covering approximately 7,000 to 8,000 hectares of at-risk land. We need alternative water, not only for our rural communities, not only for our rural catchments, but also for our nearby towns and communities, for domestic and industry's future requirements. Alternative water will also have a positive environmental impact, leaving more water in our catchment, improving our water quality. It will benefit our waterways and their ecosystems. Focus by Geraldine's Water Solutions on Plan Change 7 in summary is 14.4.11 effective use of water and 14.4.14 out of catchment water, as the ability for existing water users whose allocation has been significantly reduced to have alternative supplies is critical. The policy changes have been discussed with our consultant Hayley McCabe of Aerocon Resources. She has helped us considerably in the outline of this framework, which is in our statement of evidence. In conclusion, GWS is seeking that the plan enables a new source of water and alternatives from outside the OTOP region. On the basis we continue to support recommendations made by the Temuka Working Party and the Rari Water Society, particularly given the economic impact of the changes of the flow regimes. Furthermore, our departure from the minimum flows and the allocations being brought forward from 2040 to 2035 is not supported. Such changes mean there must be water sourced from outside the OTOP region, and from our experience to date with GWS, this takes time. There's a real need to see what the outcomes of this plan is for irrigators, to then know what they're dealing with and proceed on the onerous journey of trying to get a scheme up and running to supply water to this catchment. From conception to design, funding, resource consenting and construction, and depending on the government of the day, this could easily take 15 to 20 years. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ward. Commissioner Van Dort, isn't any questions?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple. Your paragraph 20, and you just mentioned that then the issue of bringing the minimum flows and allocation forward from 2040 to 2035. Which table of the plan are you referring to? The WRRP?
The Rari plan.
So that'd be table 14H?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. I just wanted to check I had the right table. And in the evidence, you mentioned the Klondike Ponds. Can you just remind us what the Klondike Ponds are?
That's a proposed pond that's going to be built in Mid-Canterbury, and so we supported them in their application for their hearing, because we maybe see that as a potential water source for the future.
Okay. And whereabouts would those ponds be?
They're going to be built in the Hines Arundel area.
Okay. All right, thanks. They're just the two matters I wanted to clarify, otherwise that's good, thanks.
No, thank you for your time.
Now, the Klondike Ponds that you've just been referring to, is that the source that you had in mind, excuse me, when you speak of bringing water south?
That is one potential source, but the other thing we potentially see is that a lot of farmland in Mid-Canterbury has gone from the old traditional border diking to pivots and laterals, so the efficiency of the amount of water they're using is a lot higher, so there's actually probably other surplus water available in Mid-Canterbury as well.
That's all very interesting. Thank you so much, because you've given us something new to think about, and commendable activities of your organisation, Geraldine Water Solutions, as well as your own farming activities yourself. Thank you very much, Mr. Ward. We appreciate you coming in and giving us that information.
Thank you for your time.
Now, next we could hear from Rangitata Dairies Partnership. They represented today.
Yes, they're here. They're just stepping up to the table now.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome. Thank you very much for coming in. Would you like to start by identifying yourselves so that we know who we're listening to?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. Firstly, my name is Justin O'Brien, and I'm employed as a support analyst by the Rangitata Dairies Limited Partnership. And with me is Glenn Smith. Glenn is the General Manager of Rangitata Dairies and is also a member of the OTOP Zone Committee. So he's supporting us in our presentation this morning. I'll just go through the submission that we've made or presented to the hearing committee. Rangitata Dairies own and support 7 dairy farms and support blocks. 5 of the dairy farms and 1 support block are within the area covered by Plan Change 7. The properties are all irrigated from groundwater and or water supplied from the Rangitata South irrigation scheme. So the submission we're talking about this morning refers to the proposed policies and rules relating to groundwater allocation and nitrogen loss from the farming activities. And firstly, I'll talk about groundwater allocation. Policy 1447 relates to groundwater allocation limits. The policy under Part A provides for all existing groundwater abstractions, which is referred to as the A allocation limit. While Rangitata Dairies supports the policy, the allocation limit specified in Table 14 ZB needs to reflect this. This Section 42A report from the Council officers notes that the policy is not necessarily reflected in the associated rule framework. The report indicates that the intent is not to adopt the sum of current takes as the proposed limit, rather it is sought to reduce the allocation to the limits originally intended. Policy 14411 prioritises the water supplied by an irrigation scheme over water taken from on-farm sources. Applications to take additional water to scheme water will only be granted where it can be demonstrated that the water supplied by the scheme is used efficiently and to the fullest extent possible, so as to minimise the abstraction of other water. All of Rangitata Dairies properties within the area covered by the plan change receive water to varying degrees from the Rangitata South irrigation scheme. While Rangitata Dairies supports the policy, it is sought that in the application of the policy, consideration is also given to the reliability of the water supplied by the scheme. While the Section 42A report notes that the policy does not restrict the use of water from other sources when scheme water is unavailable, having provision for scheme water does not necessarily mean that the water is available to the farm. Another method to manage this would be to have a total seasonal allocation of water from scheme and groundwater sources. Policy 14212 relates to the efficient use of water. The policy restricts the volume and or rate of water allocated to any permit for irrigation that will replace an existing water permit to a volume and or rate that reflects past use as determined from records of past use. Rangitata Dairies supports this policy as allocating water based on actual usage will aid in ensuring allocations are realistic and representative of actual use. Under Rule 1459, the taking and use of groundwater is a restricted discretionary activity provided the following condition is met, and I won't read that out. While this rule provides for the granting of new water permits to replace expiring permits subject to the allocation limit needs to reflect the policy. Another option would be to allow for the replacement of current water permits subject to policies 14411 and 14412. I'll just cover now our submission regarding the nitrogen loss reductions from farming activities. Rangitata Dairies recognise that groundwater nitrate concentrations in some locations have increased, and the proposed nitrogen loss reductions outlined in Policy 14418 in these locations are in response to these increases. The proposed reductions outlined in Table 14ZC are consistent with the recommendation of the Zone Committee. This recognises the need for a reduction and provides a time frame for implementation and achievement of this change. Rangitata Dairies supports the policy. Thank you, and happy to have any questions you may have.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Smith, were you going to add something more before we come to questions?
Only if required to fill any further detail as required.
All right, yes, well, thank you very much. Any questions, Commissioner Van Voorthuizen?
No questions. That was very clear, but I think I'll just note that your paragraph 8, you referred to policy 14.2.12. I think that should just be 14.4.12, which you correctly refer to down in your para 10. So just correct a little typo for the record, in case we come back to it later and think, oh, what's that policy? But no questions other than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, gentlemen, I just wondered whether you might be able to help us a little in this regard. We've all been caught, well, that's probably not the right word to use, but we now have a new national policy statement about fresh water, and that requires the regional councils to have certain priorities about the use of water, which are a bit different from the more, well, I should be careful what words I use, but the system that we had before. And so I was wondering whether that new obligation on the council to give effect to these priorities, what difference does that make to the submissions that you've been presenting to us today?
If I could speak to that, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
In regards to the allocation of water, what we're proposing we feel is consistent with the priorities that are given. Given that the Rangitata South Irrigation Scheme, when it was put in place, we saw that one of the key benefits for a lot of our land was the ability to actually leave water in the ground and use essentially floodwater or high flow water through that scheme. So, but to make that scheme and the use of it viable, the ability to have water available when that high flow water is not available to maintain operations is critical. It is relatively expensive water, so therefore we need to be able to have consistency, which some supplementary groundwater when surface water is not available is key to maintaining that consistent supply to provide the value in that.
And with the possibility of taking groundwater, is there really limit to the amount of groundwater that you can take? Or does some of it have to be left in for the ecosystem of the aquifer?
Yeah, all of our groundwater takes have instantaneous flow rates, plus we also have for at least one of our properties a seasonal allocation already, which has reduced slightly from where it was previously, and our understanding is that will continue to reduce based on actual use in the future. And as example, we have effectively switched off 2 of our groundwater pumps because we have scheme water, and that has happened already. We're very confident it will not be required in the future, and there could be more in the future as we refine that. So there are already limitations on there. Rangitata Dairies actually went through the hearings process back in, I think it was 2005 or 6, to actually be allocated the last within the original allocation limits, the last of water, and you can imagine their distress to see more and more water allocated over there, and that's what we're dealing with now, is trying to pull the allocation back. So the scheme and efficiencies will lead to that as well.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Your submission has been interesting and informative, and you've come in to explain it further to us, and we're grateful to you both for that. Thanks indeed.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Now, is there another submission this morning, Ms. Fernando?
No, not this morning.
So this afternoon we have Guiney Family Trust, is it?
Yes, that's correct.
And Mr. Stone?
Yes.
And they're coming at 2 o'clock, is that right?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll adjourn the hearing until 2 o'clock this afternoon then. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.